As you know, I read a lot of books, and a lot of them just kind of not really impress me. I find them good enough. I find them great, but only a few really shock me. Only a few really impress me. And I'm happy that today I have on the call with me two of the people who most shocked me with their latest and probably first book. So happy to have Alexander Taryshkin and Marcio Souza, the authors of Value Advisory Selling in the Complex World of Endless Alternatives, here with me on the show. Hi, guys.
Hello,
Hi,
good
Tobias.
afternoon.
Hey, hey. So, first of all, guys, and thanks for both joining the episode because this is the first episode with two guests all at once. I shared with you a script, but as I told you, I wanted to really challenge you because, as I said, a few books really shock me. First question I have for you guys is: did you realize what you wrote or not?
Uh, I can start, and I have to start by thanking Alex here. He was the one who pushed me throughout this journey. We started. The idea was to write something about value, which we didn't know the size, the scope, the depth, the length, but we liked the topic. We're passionate about that. We were working with that, so we started writing. And suddenly, this becomes this little monster that starts kind of growing, because there's so much interesting stuff around that, and then became this full fledged book. But yeah, I thank Alex for pushing me in this journey.
It was definitely a journey, yeah. And Tobias, thank you very much for the kind words. Yeah, it's something that I think we just wanted to put our thoughts on paper and share with the world sort of what we know. And I think we were planning initially, Marcio, for something like 8 months for the journey to take, but ended up being about 2 years. But got through at the end of it at the end.
I can see that it took 2 years in the way it's structured and the way it is written. Now we will get there. Just for so I avoid that my audience gets lost. Just a few words about you guys because I know you because of this book. I know you because now your faces that I finally see are attached to value advisory words, which is probably something that should happen from the release of the book onwards. But if you would just want to say a few words on you, what you do, what you've done, what led you getting interested in value advisory, how did you end up there? Because on the back of the book, there is a story of both of you, and none of them makes sense in the enterprise software selling space. And this is what I found extremely interesting. So please go ahead. I don't know, Marcio, Alex, who wants to start first?
Well, let me take this one first here. So I have always worked with technology. So throughout my life, I started working in Brazil. Well, in the beginning of the telecom days, there when it was privatized, was kind of tech and telco were kind of combined, and it was a big boom there. I had the dream of moving abroad and studying abroad for a while. I ended up leaving my career in telco in Brazil and coming to do my MBA in London. And kind of naturally, around that time, I think the world has changed now, but around that time, you finish an MBA, you either go to finance or to consulting. That was kind of 80% of the people would go to these two types of careers. I ended up going to consulting because I had already kind of worked with a lot of consultants. So I started working consulting in also again in the telco tech space. So either doing tech strategy or working in the for the tech industry or telco industry. That actually led me to value, and I'll explain why. At that point, I Oracle, which was the first kind of company, non-consulting company I worked in London, had a value team which was called Insight, and they only hired ex-consultants. So it was kind of a law for them that they would only hire ex-strategy consultants. So it was a natural path for you if you wanted to leave consulting, and I wanted to leave consulting by then. This was one of the nice places to go because you would still deal with kind of consulting mindset with tech topics, but in a industry environment, not in a consulting environment. And that's how I started in value at Oracle. Then I moved to Workday and spent kind of quite a lot of time there.
That's a good point, Alex. Up to you now, because I think that probably in Workday, you met in Workday, guys, isn't it?
It is
Okay.
indeed, yeah. Marcio actually hired me into Workday, so we go quite a way back. Yeah, so I sort of come from the other side, as Marcio mentioned. There's consulting and finance. So I'm a chartered financial analyst. That's my designation. I began my career in capital markets right after essentially the 2008 financial crisis, which was an interesting time, especially that I was working for the Bank of Canada on the trading desk, and at the time was seeing very timid recovery taking place from a macro perspective, which was again an incredible time just to witness everything from that standpoint. I went to work in investment banking before moving to tech. I would say generally the reason why I ended up there is after 2008 there's been a lot of changes in the industry, and it just wasn't the same as it was in the heyday of the early 2000s. So I always had an interest in tech. I've done also some startups at the early times of my career. I also kind of worked with a VC fund, and after UBS was looking for my next move, that's when really the opportunity presented itself to move into value advisory. And yeah, as I said, Marcio and I, we kind of go way back, back to sort of the times when he actually hired me into Workday. To be honest, when I didn't really know what value advisory was when I was applying. I thought it was more of an account management job. But a friend at the time said I should go for it because much of my skill set was from my skill set from investment banking was transferable, and I think kudos to Marcio that he saw that side of it. I spent a number of years in the value advisor since then, working sort of on small, large accounts, net new names, customer base, and just across the multiple geographies. And now I do sales strategy for UK and Ireland of Workday.
Got it. So they are both interesting paths, and I think that they kind of shape your, let's say, skills, everything that you're applying now. So why I got interested in the book, I think it's a good point because probably I am ignorant on this, but I think this is one of the few value advisory books ever written, guys. Am I correct? Does the other one relate to kind of early 2000, or am I missing something?
Yeah, indeed. There's a few books been written on it, but most most of them been kind of written on sort of value selling, and the concept of value selling obviously isn't new. If you search kind of for value selling on Amazon, you'll find probably a dozen books out there on this topic, and just various derivatives of it. Uh, just in terms of thinking about what value advisory really means, it can be a fairly vague term, right? Generally speaking, it's something that's intuitive. It means just not just to sell based on features and functions, but rather to understand what the prospect wants to achieve from a more strategic perspective. And for the salesperson, it just means kind of to do research on the prospect, understand their pain points. It also means that the sales rep needs to kind of tailor the message to the customer needs. And there's obviously every salesperson kind of does that, right? And that's not necessarily what value advisory is. This is not what Marcia and I were doing day to day in our jobs. And that's why we decided to kind of write this book that is a little bit more focused on value advisory itself, rather than, again, the vague term of value selling that can be interpreted in many different ways.
Yeah. And in addition to that, I think what first expanding that from value selling only to a broader view, but also we wanted to talk about how to set up a value team. What can you outsource? What can you automate? So it's beyond just the core of the value advisory function, but everything around it. As if you want to be a professional in that area, or if you are around value advisory as a sales leader or as a GM or anything like that.
And thanks for the answer. And you want to know what really kind of impressed me at the beginning when I read the book? When I realized I was reading a really impressive book, when you spoke about utility, which for someone means nothing, but for me really understood, let me understand finally what value advisory is meant to. I mean, we are a lot of, as you said, Alex, but also as Marcio refrained, everyone tells us to sell the value. So most of the time, we find the pain points, find the problems, then align our solution and map against what can be the pain point or what can be the problem. But this is kind of value selling, which is different from selling value that is related to the concept of utility. This is what the concept that shocked me the most, because I finally understood what I was kind of trying to do with the transformation team. So when I realized that you were able to craft such a complex topic in simple words, I really realized that I was in front of a really impressive book, and I decided to really write here. So question is linked to the software space. I think that we all share this, let's say, profession in common, this industry in common. But and I know that value advisory is strong in the software B2B sales. Competitive pressures are higher. A lot of companies out there, no one knows how to differentiate. But you seem to have a totally different view about value advisory. You seem to apply it in every industry in the B2B, but also in the B2C. So other than software and probably on your consulting practice or whatever, where do you see value advisory applied and used the most? And where do you see it coming in the future?
You want to go first, Alex? Or
Sure. Yeah. Well, look, I guess we took a view here really from enterprise software perspective, right? And the reason why really is not just because our experience is in enterprise software, but I think it's also because it's almost very exemplary to the way value advisory can be applied. Uh, as you said, especially in the world today, bar confusion is high, right? Ability to measure and understand the benefits of a product can be quite difficult. And this is kind of, as we look at the landscape of where many products stand today, right? A lot of competing products, uh, definitely selection for the buyer is very difficult. And yeah, just a lot of uncertainty about what kind of product you end up with. So in general, this is where enterprise software again becomes very exemplary because you have large teams of value advisors that are trying to explain the value to the buyer. And in large organizations such as Salesforce, for example, you have hundreds of people globally that are working within the value advisory team. So you get very sophisticated value services. And again, that's allows us to kind of put a lot of that into the book to actually explain sort of what value advisory is. Now, obviously, that's kind of the most obvious case, or at least the most obvious case to us. We did want to take in our book a more expansive view because these functions, also exist outside of the ERP world. And if we think about sort of the manufacturing sector, for example, SKF is a great example of this. They back in the day, they've kind of done this bearings and seal manufacture, and that's a very well documented story. And this is really where kind of they were the pioneers of this value-based selling approach. And that's something that's quite well documented, again, as I said, in different books as well. There's other examples of this too. So, for example, GE, they had the Proof Not Promise program that was instituted back in 1992. And that effectively provided GE customers with that kind of calculator to measure the return on, at the time something they applied it to was kind of return on environment, as they called it, which is essentially the monetary impact that the customer was getting from having a positive impact on the environment. But again, as we start applying this more broadly, BPO is another area where we see consultants sell based on value, because obviously that's the main reason for outsourcing. That's BPO being business process outsourcing. The main reason for outsourcing ultimately is for customers to save money, right? So the BPO has to show that there's a cheaper way to go with their service versus keeping the process in house. And B2C, there's various applications to it as well. So there's psychologist Barry Schwartz, and there's a great actually TED talk on this, and he kind of talks about the book that he's written about the paradox of choice. and he says how today buying decisions are much more complicated than they used to be before. And he kind of draws this example about back in the day, a person would have just one set of jeans that essentially they look to buy. Now they have thousands of options. So how do they go about making that simple decision? And actually, the more choices you have, the more complicated it becomes, more challenging it becomes. And this is really, again, where value advisory becomes key, because in today's world, again, even consumers face thousands of different options. And selling on value becomes very important, because oftentimes they actually don't understand what feature functions may bring to them. And hence, actually getting them to understand what value they may derive from the product or service that they're buying becomes crucial in order to differentiate. Marcio, if there's anything else you...
No, I think that's it. Yeah, I mean, enterprise software kind of sits in an interesting corner, because the need for the products sometimes is not 100% clear. So can you do that with Excel or with some manual processes? So do I really need that? And on top of that, if I need that, do I need to buy a premium software provider? Don't you have like cheaper ones? So the reason why companies like Workday or Salesforce that charge a premium, that sell the best product in the market, really rely on value advisory, is because they need to convince people on the category, and then on a premium price for the leader of the category. So that's why it's so prevalent for this industry, and especially if you're selling premium price.
And thank you for the answer. I think that for those who will be smart enough to buy the book, I think that the pages where you show the advertisement of that bank, you start pointing at it, like really kind of evaluating all the elements. I think that can give even a better perspective on how value advisory can be applied to the B2C, let's say, a word in that situation. I think that another point I wanted to touch with you, because I think that, as I told you, and as I wrote in the email, we will need like 6 hours, 7 hours to really ask you all the questions I have in mind, but we will stick to the 30, 45 minutes that I promised. Is I felt you wrote the book giving away everything. I mean, not everything, but pretty much everything a company founder, even a startup founder, or even a manager can need to at least, start the value advisory function or work in his organization. And I was fascinated about the operating model, because you basically shared with me and with all the readers how to build a system that adds value in every step of the interaction with the customer, that basically flips the selling cycle from how I want to sell into how customer want to buy, and how we map value in every step of the customer interaction cycle. So just out of your mind, if you want to share something more about this, because I think that this is really one of the building blocks of the book.
Do you want me to? Yeah,
guys, so, whoever wants to go first.
No, I can start. So the objective was actually, yes, to make the book as practical as possible, and to share the knowledge, and to expand kind of value advisory as practice, as an industry, and that was that. So that's why the particular framework that you mentioned, and the way we approach that, is to say that value advisory, usually people think about value advisory equals business cases, or something the last stages of the sales cycle, to convince a buyer to buy something because there's an ROI of 300% or something like that. What we wanted to highlight in the book, that value comes throughout the cycle, all the way from demand generation, when you build points of view, when you don't even know the names and the faces of the prospects. You're trying to target an industry as a whole, or a segment as a whole, or geography as a whole. So all the way from there to maturing a deal, to then building the business case, to convincing people to buy. So it goes along the sales cycle. That's what we wanted to convey with that particular aspect and framework that you mentioned.
Yeah, and probably even goes beyond that, to be honest, right? So we kind of one way we think about it is, what's the sort of the customer value management cycle, if you will, right? So all the way from the origination of the product to essentially, post sale, and there's multiple steps there in the process, right? So even if we think about that very initial step, so you know I guess one way to look at, the way we call it is value engineering, and that's again not to be confused with value advisory or value consulting, because value engineering by definition was where we engineer based on value, right? So again, if we think about the product, there's multiple aspects to it in terms of how do we really create something that the customer needs, right? So if we think about developing, focusing on producing a product that actually is as I said, delivers value. So, for example, if we're thinking about even outsourcing firm, right? An outsourcing firm could be doing HR or finance outsourcing, and outsourcing HR is more about reducing headcount costs, whereas by contrast, finance outsourcing is more about sort of reducing the risk and providing specialized expertise for local regulatory reporting, for example. And if we compare the two, finance outsourcing has much higher value to the customer because it's a much more sophisticated task. So that's one way to kind of start all the way at the sort of product creation phase. And as Marcio said, then we move on to demand generation. So making sure that value is threaded all throughout the marketing content. And oftentimes, as you go to a company website, you actually don't see a lot of value messaging because that's not necessarily how a marketing team thinks about it. And this is again where valorization becomes very important, something that value teams invest a lot of time in. As Marcio said, and then we focus sort of on the whole selling process and also beyond. So valorization and value expansion, meaning how do we sell on additional products to a customer? How do we make sure that we're supporting renewals, reducing churn, and overall really sort of laying the foundation for a very successful long-term relationship with the customer, so that it's not just a sale and move on, but rather a very long journey together.
Thanks for both the answers, and I think that this brings us. I think that the beginning of this conversation brings us to my next question, because I was interested in understanding how you ended up doing what you do, because you love what you do, and probably you didn't know that that job existed. Okay, so but you live, you bred that thing, you write about that thing. So I think that one of the most interesting, a question is, do you imagine what would you have done if value advisory didn't exist? What kind of job did you like? Probably stick into consultancy, or I don't know. Marcio, go first.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, maybe sticking to consulting a little bit longer. I always felt that consulting for me was a bit of a, I'll be here for a while, but it's not where I wanted to be in the long run. So maybe stick for a little bit longer. The role that I have today, and probably similar to what Alex has today at Workday, it would be a natural kind of plan B for me, which ended up being my plan A after value, because in field strategy, field operations, sales strategy, which is what we do today, a lot of those skills are useful, right? The analytical skills, the fact that you work with and around salespeople the whole day, or in the middle of sales cycles. There's a lot of that that comes from consulting, but not only. But then it's shaped during value, and then I moved on to sales strategy. So that kind of path is very common in a lot of my value friends. Alex, he can speak about, but when we decided to hire Alex, he had a slightly different background because he didn't come from consultant. But what we look, say, listen, the guy has superb analytical skills. He has good customer hands because he's in financial services dealing with M&A customers and all of that. So why would we just stick to consulting just because it's a rule, because it's a law? What are the skills that we're looking in consulting? This, and that. And Alex ticked all the boxes. That's why he ended up moving to the value world from a non-conventional background. But I'll let him talk about his journey. Yeah.
It does always make you wonder, sort of, the kind of people that get into the whole value advisory field as well. Yeah, for myself, what I would have done differently or where I would have ended up, not sure. Probably, as Marcio said, I would have, he would have stuck to consulting a bit longer. I would have stuck to banking a bit longer. And but I think the sales from the standpoint of whether it's value advisory or sales strategies is very interesting, because for a person who comes in with a fairly sort of structured analytical mindset, you can deconstruct the entire sales practice into multiple steps, into sort of ingredients of success. And I think what a great example actually that comes to mind is one of the enablements that has been done at that I've participated in. We had one of our season A's kind of speak about what they see as sort of the ingredients of success of a sales cycle. And one would think, somebody comes up with about 2 or 3 sort of pointers, right, that one has to focus on. Whereas the German and very good salesperson that I used to work with, he had something like 23 items on that list, and that speaks a lot about how structured sales process can be. It's not really an art; it is a science. And once you understand that it is science, and you start deconstructing into that sort of points of success, that is how you build a successful sales organization or value advisory practice as well.
That's a really good point. And my next question, I mean, what led us to my next question is actually your answer, but I was interested in really knowing about the future of this profession, because you have one of the chapters of the book is the future of value advisory. And one of the sentences that I like the most is many organizations will simply be unable to hire ex BCG consultants. And I didn't think about it, because I said, okay, this can be cool. The job can be cool. Software companies can hire everyone from BCG, from McKinsey, from all these top tier consulting firms. But are these people really willing to move? Oh, did it happen just to Marcio and Alex? So my question is, due to that, the world will go even more probably complex. More solutions will get out. We don't know with the AI or whatever. But anyway, the function that you represent will expand. What would be the best characteristics, skills, and personality traits that a company should look for if they want to hire someone? And let's flip it, because I think that Marcio has the answer because he hired Alex. But I want to hear from Alex first now.
Well, I've done my fair share of hiring as well into value advisory teams. So I've seen a lot of candidates, come and go. Look, I think the way we also, Marcia and I really try to think about, and this is one of the chapters that we do have in the book in terms of like, how do you hire the right individuals? And the 3 really elements that we came to there is that, look, first thing is a value advisor is a sales job. So you do need to have sales skills. The other bit is that you need consulting skills. And the third bit is that you need to have knowledge of the product or the service offering that the organization has. And as I said, sales skills are important because ultimately it is a sales job. It's not just about being within the sales organization, but it's predominantly the fact that you are client facing. So you need to build that executive relationship with the stakeholders, and you need to be able to be convincing, to have the right right skill sets to really be able to deliver the message. And the other bits in terms of like consulting skills, you need to be able to work with a lot of unknowns. You need to be able to synthesize information very effectively, and that's a big part of the value advisory job. And lastly, as I said, so product and product knowledge. That is important because you are selling a product, and to be able to sort of explain to the functional person that you're dealing with what is it that you're selling becomes very key. And this really, if you start deconstructing into those 3 elements, that is really where you start realizing that a BCG consultant is an option. However, it doesn't have to be. And a lot of the folks that we've hired, a lot of my colleagues, not all of them were those kind of MBB consultants. There were people that were coming from the industry, so who could speak the language, who could really understand the product. There were solution consultants that were they came into the team who really knew the product we were selling and were able to build that relationship that way. And really, then the rest of the skill sets start to adapt. And the other thing that's quite important as well is to really think about what is the role of the value advisor that you have in your organization, because not all of them are your traditional sort of client-facing individuals. We see a significant trend right now with value advisor moving more into that kind of COE function. So that means the value advisor then has to predominantly not just focus on the client-facing bit of it, but also be able to do effective enablement with the organization, to be able to deliver, to build the right tools that sales people use as well. So it becomes more of an internal function that needs a very different skill set as well. Again, I think some kind of combination of the three that I've mentioned, the three skills, but in a bit of a different balance. Marcio, is there anything else?
Up to you if you have something else to add, Marcio.
No. I mean, not a lot to add. Yeah, it's perfect. Again, I'll restate that. We usually used to hire quite a bunch of consultants. So I think gladly now we're being more democratic, because you need these analytical skills that automatically the consulting firm has screened for that already. Can someone sit in front of a bunch of customers, kind of digest all this very unstructured qualitative and quantitative information and come up with a hypothesis and a kind of a story? Well, a consultant is built to do that. That's why it was an easy kind of pick to hire a consultant to do that. But it's not only. I mean, Alex came from banking and he had those skills. And I on the technology front, I mean, I see now in my current role in field operations, I know much less about the products now, because now I have a strategy role. I'm more kind of internal. When I was in value, I had to be super up to speed with kind of the new features and what the new releases of the product they were going to bring to the customer. So, like Alex said, a value advisor needs to be super into the product and what the product brings to the customer.
I think also with the way sort of AI is developing now too, if you really go into ChatGPT and you search, what is the value of my product, and especially if the product is kind of out there that ChatGPT knows about, you will get a fairly decent explanation of sort of what the quantified value drivers could be, right? And this is again where that means the skill set is evolving. That means that value teams need to sort of be a little bit more creative into about what kind of value they're delivering, their own value to the organization. And this is also where we, Marcio and I kind of, as when we were writing the book, we did try to think about what is the future of the value advisory team or value advisory function in general. And apart from, as I said, a little bit more maybe internal focused function, there could be other applications of it as well. So, we kind of thought, look, it could be something like a value advisory as a service. And to be honest, there is that exists already. So if you go into, likes of maybe Forrester or Capgemini, do produce value realization studies on behalf of organizations, right? And this is a perfect example of how essentially value advisory can be outsourced to a third party. And other applications as well, can value advisor be a more specialized service that actually the organization charges money for example, right? Again, very interesting, maybe a different skill set there. Can it be part of a procurement team on the buyer side? So, not just the seller's value advisor, but really the buyer's value advisory individual sitting there, or maybe even as part of corporate communications. So, think about, I think there was a case during the COVID where Tesco said we're going to freeze our prices for a little bit. So what if there was an individual within the team that actually quantified and said, look, we have just delivered 6 million to UK consumers just by doing that action.
That's a really good answer, and I thank you for that. What I really loved about your both answers is that the way you kind of identify the skills needed for a value advisor, they go back to the beginning of the book. So when you start dividing from operating benefits, functional efficiency, and business impact, and I think that at these kind of three levels you're able really to construct really the value and to really build the value for the customer. So I think that Marcio's back. Here we go. And so I think that I got all the questions I had in mind. I just have one last off-topic question before the next, let's say, the future. What do you see the future for yourself is? My question is, do you think that the word value has been overused?
Probably, and I suppose that's why we wrote this book, just to make sure that we go back to what the roots of the word value really are.
I mean, nobody would say or confess that, oh, we're not selling value here. We're just trying to sell feature function, or we try to just beat them on price. Even though a lot of companies would still have a strategy of kind of power them high, sell them cheap, or be philosophically very feature function based. I mean, everybody would say that they're selling value. Yeah, it's been overused, but maybe that's the future. That's where companies are going.
You know what? It's I realized when it was overused when I was consulting this company in the med tech space. I put it in that way. And I had that manager. She came into the room and said, "Nah, our prices are too low from tomorrow, guys. You gotta sell on value." And everyone was looking at it saying, "What do you mean? Like, what does it mean?" And finally, now, as Alex said, that's the reason why you wrote the book. It has a meaning. My last question for you is: what is the future? What kind of next projects you're working on and related to value advisory, other than your regular job? Are you working on? I don't know, because I see these book evolving in a lot of different ways. I see courses, I see other books, I see speaking, I see engagements. Probably you're doing this already. So it will be a good advertising for everyone who's listening. But I really see that thing evolving because I think that out of 250 pages, you can really build an academy. But maybe I'm wrong.
Uh, I'll go first, I suppose. Yeah, building on my experience in value advisory and sales strategy, I've recently began offering sort of consulting engagements with companies that are not yet able to afford a full-time value advisor. I do find that any organization that I speak to is always very interested in my help to build out sort of the right value messaging and empower their sales team with the right tools to be able to sell based on value. The interesting bit is that many of the organizations I speak to are not actually in the same ERP space, but more so in industries such as fintech, outsourcing, even crypto. So yeah, that's all kind of the interesting work that's coming my way. I'm still at the early stage of this journey, but I see it growing as the need is definitely there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I did not engage in any other new activities other than talking to lovely people like you and having these conversations and talking to some peers in the industry. Sometimes we have get-togethers, and it's super nice to exchange ideas, talk about the book, but talk about value advisory as a science, as an art. What I am doing today, having moved to a more kind of field operations COO type of role, in a smaller company, Eightfold, which doesn't have like a big value team, is to try to use my value knowledge to guide the new team, to tell them kind of what my experience brought, and just be there to help our sales team, but also the upcoming value advisory team in our field teams. So that's for me what I'm doing today. I am consumed by that. Yeah.
I mean, a lot of things to do. Anyway, I think that we are finished for today. I really thank you for joining the episode and really sharing with us your point of views on value, but especially the kind of interesting insights for sales leaders or everyone who wants to go deep into this practice. For all those signed to the newsletter, you will have a direct link that goes to the book. And you will also be able to follow Marcio and Alex. I think that the best option is to follow them on LinkedIn. So I think that everything is. I don't have any other questions, strangely, because I had way too many and I had to cut them because we didn't have 6 hours. But really, thank you so much, Alex. And thank you, Marcio, for being here. I don't know if that is, Alex, something else you want to say and tell to the audience, like a goodbye or whatever comes up to your mind.
Just wanted to say a big thank you, Tobia, for having us. It's been a very, very pleasant conversation and true pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I appreciate that. And yeah, thanks again. And I look forward to welcome you again when you will write something new. Bye.
Thank you.